Welcome to Designs by Diane. Today we're going to work on a rail fence quilt block to make this quilt behind me. We want to work on our seam widths and just getting comfortable with sewing and coming out with squared up blocks and then assembling the quilt top. Come along and let's get busy quilting. Okay, first let's talk about the tools we're going to need today. We're going to need something to sew this material together with, so we need our sewing machine or serger, but I prefer sewing machine most of the time. You're going to need straight pins, scissors, seam rippers, because you are going to have to rip some things out from time to time. We need our material, and we'll go over that in further detail in a moment. We need a pattern. Now this is the rail fence pattern. It's very, very simple. You make the blocks and then you turn them in different directions to come up with the pattern. So it is very, very simple. It is a good beginner project. When the blocks are turned, you do not have to match up any seams, so it's a very simple block and very user-friendly. We're going to need tape measures to measure long spans once our quilt starts getting good size. We need clamps, and I will show you what I use these for later, but I like to clamp things down when I pin them so that I know that everything is clamped, is pinned evenly. We're going to need good sewing thread. We do not want anything that's going to break and tear up on us and not give us a quality product. We need marking utensils. This is a pen that I found you can put different colors of chalk in it so that you can mark on different colors of fabric, and I got this just at the fabric store, so it's easy to find and it's very good. You have all kinds of different colors of chalk you can use. A good rotary cutter, be sure to keep the end on it to protect it. This one has the end automatically on it. It comes out to cover the blade. If you bang your blade up, it will not cut a good seam, and you will have areas of your cloth that do not come apart, and we don't want to deal with that. We will need rulers, and I have my large 15-inch ruler here. That's my square. And then I have a smaller square for cutting up smaller things. We have a good cutting mat here, and we're ready to go. Now let's talk about the fabric we're going to use for this quilt. We want good 100% cotton fabric. We want to purchase enough of each color that we need. There is no more than a yard of any of these that's used in this quilt behind me. If you have scraps, that's good to use the scraps up for this. I use this green on the framework around the center part just because it matched so well with the green and this other blue material. Use scraps up. A lot of your scraps, you'll have enough for this type of quilt, and you can use them up in it. But I like to have a center of the quilt and then frame it with a narrow frame of a darker material. Then have a light border that you can really enjoy quilting in and show off your quilting. And then another dark section that your binding will go on, and that really sets the quilt off. Get enough of your material. Make sure it does not have stains, holes, tears, dry rot, any of that in it. And it's in good quality. If you want to wash it prior to this, do so and have it ready. I do not pre-wash my material. If it needs ironing, I will iron it so that I can get good cuts when I use my rotary cutter. But other than that, I do not do anything else to the material beforehand. The block that we're going to work on today, the rail fence block, is one block made out of 4 strips. Now we're going to cut our material in strips and then sew them together and then cut the block the width that it is in the other direction. And we're going to try for our 1/4 inch seam, but if it's a little off, we can adjust it in that way. Now this block is right here. You've got 4 strips. Here's the same block, only it's turned on its side. You've got the same 4 strips. For this quilt, we're going to have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 5, 6. So we need 30 of these blocks. So that's the first thing we're going to do, is to construct the blocks. Now let's get our fabric prepared so that we can cut our strips. I'm going to take this bolt of fabric, and I don't want to deal with a whole bolt of fabric. So I'm going to take about a yard of it, and I'm going to cut right here, just enough into it so that I can tear it. That gives me a pretty even edge. And we can get rid of that and get it out of our way. We want to have just enough that we can work with it, but have enough room that we can get enough strips out of it. Now I'm going to take it and lay it where the selvages are straight across here. Then I'm going to bring the bottom up and make sure it is even with the selvages. Now this side may not come out as straight. It is on this one, but it may come out where it's uneven. We're going to cut off a little bit and make sure it is squared up. I'm going to take my square and line up the bottom with one of the lines on the square to where all four edges are sticking out a little bit, and then I'm going to cut this off, and I know I've got a squared edge on this edge. And my cutter doesn't want to cut today. Now on this pattern, I made 2.5 inch strips, and I need 6 2.5 inch strips for the blocks to make this quilt. So 2.5 times 6 is 15, and I have a 15 inch square, so I'm not going to move my square. I'm just going to turn around over here and cut on the other side. And then I'm going to come back a little bit, and I have a dull blade here. We don't want a dull blade. Then I want to come and I'll slide my square back to the 12.5, because 12.5 is 2.5 less than 15. So I'm going to come down by 2.5 inch segments and cut, and that way I don't have to handle my material any more than I have to. You want to make sure the line at the bottom is even, and the 12.5 mark is over here. We'll cut one strip, then we're going to back it off 2.5 inches more, which is 10. So we go to the 10 line, make sure that bottom is straight, cut again. Come back 2.5 inches again. You're at 7.5 now, and you learn these amounts. The more you do it, the more you get used to it, and you learn which number comes next. Come back to the 5. That's the next one. Keep it even at the bottom and even on the side. Then our last line is the 2.5, because we want the 2.5 inch square, so that will be the last one. And we have all of our squares, all of our strips cut. Now, I take them while they're still sitting here, and I pull the top section, which is the folded section, out of the way. Just gently, don't dislodge them. Pull the bottom out of the way. Then I set my square back on the strips, lining up the edge, just enough to cut off these selvages up here, and then I know that all the selvages are gone. So we have just cut all the blue strips we need for this quilt. I've already cut six strips in the 4 colors that I need: the blue, the purple, the gold, and the cream. Now this is the block we're actually going to make. We're going to make 30 of them and turn them in different directions to make this quilt top. But right now, all we're thinking about is this block right here, 4 strips sewn together. We're going to do it over and over till we get 30 of them. But only think of this one block and don't get overwhelmed. Now we have 6 strips cut of each one of these colors. And you'll notice in the block behind me, it's blue, and then the purple, and then the gold and the cream. But I'm going to put the 2 together each time that I want to sew together. So I'm going to sew each blue to the purple. So I will do the same thing 6 times until I have all 6 of these sewn together. We're going to start sewing with the blue and the purple. I have put them right sides together, even up the top and even up the right side. I'm going to put them under my presser foot, where I have already arranged to have it come out with a 1/4 inch seam. Now, if you don't have a 1/4 inch seam at the end, we're going to discuss how to make your blocks square anyway. But our goal is to try to work on our 1/4 inch seam, actually scant 1/4 inch seam each time until we get it right. When we sew these 2.5 inch strips together, they should come out to be 4.5 inches if our seam is correct. So I'm going to start sewing, and I'll be sewing for a while. Keep your edges together as you sew. Make sure it's going under the edge of the presser foot. Make sure that part stays the same. You want to keep an eye on the presser foot, not the material so much. That's why I stop and arrange it and then start back. Your seam width is the important thing. And I'm going to continue until I get all of these strips sewn together. I have just finished sewing the purple to the blue. So it is done. I'm going to set it over to the side. Now I have the gold and the cream color. I'm going to get them even at the top and even on the right. I'm going to put them under my presser foot where this edge of the material lines up with this edge of the presser foot. When you start out, hold the strings that are coming up from your bobbin and your sewing machine. Don't pull on them, but give them just enough pressure that they will not get sucked down into the machine. As you sew, make sure the two layers are even together right here and that they stay even with the right side of the presser foot. At this point, speed is not the important thing. It is technique. You will gain speed as you go. Now I'm going to do these two, and then I will show you how to sew the two sets together. Now we have our purple and our blue strip together, and we have our gold and our cream strip together. We're going to iron each one toward the dark material. And this pattern is really good because you don't have to line up too many seams. I'm going to use my steam iron, and I'm ironing. I'm not pressing. I'm ironing. I don't have any bias edges to worry about. I'm going to set the seam, and then I'm going to put the iron inside. Just bump it against that seam to open it up. You don't want to press too hard on it, but you just want to open it up. I kind of use my fingers here as a lead and get it going in the right direction. You want to make sure and iron it on the outside, on the good side, to make sure you don't iron any little pockets in there. So there's the purple and blue. Now of the gold and the cream, the gold is the dark color. It's darker than the cream, so we're going to go toward the gold. You go down and set the seam, and this is just a regular steam iron. And then we're going to open it up and iron it open toward the dark. Always remember when you're ironing, whatever color is on the top, that's the direction your seam is going to wind up going. So whichever side you want the seam to go toward, put that on the top. Now I'm going to sew this strip to this strip next, and then we'll get to do some cutting. Now we're ready to sew the blue and purple strips to the golden cream strips. There are two ways to do this. You can do it this way, or you can flip one of them this way. But you have a ragged edge on this one. This one down here is the ragged edge. You want your ragged edges to stay on the same end so you get the most usage of your fabric. So you want to take your blue and purple, and the purple goes next to the gold on the pattern behind me. And make sure all of these edges that are even are at the same end. Then we're going to flip the gold on top of the purple, line them up, put them under the presser foot to the edge of the presser foot, pull our strings back here just enough. I just put my finger on top of them so they can't jerk down into the machine. And then we're going to sew these together. Now we have our 4 strips sewn together, and as I said before, if you'll make sure that your end that is even is always sewn first so that you have one basically squared in, you get that extra cut out of this. So we're going to try to make the best use of our material we can. I'm going to take my big square, and you line up one of the lines with the center line down the middle of the strips between the purple and the gold, or the blue and the purple, whichever one you want to do. but you want to make sure that this first cut squares it up, and it's an awkward cut. If you have a small table like this at home and you want to walk around on the other side, that's the best way to do it. So I'm going to make this one cut. Just pull that out of the way. I have a squared edge. Now, this should be 8.5 inches wide, and I did a good job because it's 8.5 inches wide. Now, I want to come 8.5 this way and 8.5 this way. If the width across your strips winds up a little bit less than 8.5, if you iron it out like this, and then you measure from one side to the other, and it's just shy of 8.5, just cut all your squares that same width, and then everything will still be squared up. You don't have to say, well, I've ruined this whole set of strips. Just measure and see what they are. If they're 8.5, fine. If they're a little bit shy, just cut them a little bit shy. As long as you wind up with squares, you're doing good. So we're going to go 8.5 this way and 8.5 this way. There's our first cut. So there's our block. I'm going to slide it down this way and just keep going. I should get 5 out of this if I've measured and cut right. And every now and then, no matter how good you are, you're going to mess up a cut. So don't get all upset over it. You can do another square. 2. Make sure your top and your side and your bottom line up. 3. Go 8.5 and 8.5. 4. And on your last one, 8.5. And that's why we put all the even ends together. So we have 5 blocks now. We need to do this until we have 30 blocks, and then we will assemble the quilt top and start with our borders. Finally, we have all of our blocks cut. Now we're going to go to the big wall and put them up on the flannel board so we'll know what to sew to what. Now comes the fun part. We have all of our blocks and we have our flannel board assembled. We're going to have some fun and put this quilt together and see how it looks. Okay, our quilt is up on the flannel board. Now all we have to do is take the blocks in the position they're in, sew them together, these 2 together, these 2 together, then these 2 together, and then that one. We'll have the top row sewn together. When we do that, we want to press all of our seams toward the solid piece. You have 4 seams coming this way and a solid piece. 4 seams and a solid piece. You want to press these seams toward the solid piece because that's where they automatically want to go. When we get ready to sew this row to this row to this row, we'll have a little bit of different way to handle it. But right now, we're ready to sew. Okay, now it's time to sew our blocks together. We're going to sew them row at a time. We're going to take these 2 and fold them over on each other. And this one and fold it over here and then sew those together. Then we'll come back and sew these 2 together here, and then add this one on the end, and we'll have our first row done. Now when we press the seams, we're going to press the seams toward this solid piece. You've got 3 seams coming here. You want to press it toward the solid because that's the way it wants to go. So we're going to get busy sewing. Now when we sew these together, we want to sew them in such a way that our seams are on the top and angled down on this one. You have the solid piece on the back. We won't have to fight our seams that way and make sure they're going the same way. Get your top corners together. Put your presser foot down. Hold your threads so they will not get jumbled up under there. And when you start sewing, just enough to catch it, reach down to the bottom and put those two corners together. Then when you sew, you just put a little tension on it and you don't have to pin. Okay, here are our first two blocks, the second two, the set of two. Now, according to our pattern, they will go this way. So I'm going to flip this one here. Now this time, I'm going to sew it with the solid piece on top because the seams on the back are already angled down, and that's how you want them to be. The machine will automatically feed them through that way. So we want to get them started, hold our threads. Just after you get your needle in, even these bottom corners up, and sew them, and if you need to even as you go, do so. Okay, I've gotten our last row together. Now it's time to put this in place and sew the rows together from top to bottom, and we'll have the center of our quilt finished. I've turned the top row down onto the second row, and I have them here. We want to match up this corner, and then your seams will automatically, because of the way we've pressed them, they will go in opposite directions between the blocks. You want to finger work those together, and they will nudge into each other so that when you sew across them, you should not need any pins. Just be very careful as you go to start on this end, and then get these in place and put your fingers here and put a little bit of tension, and that should keep everything in line. Now as we connect each of the rows, we sew down those seams, and then we're going to press. We want to press the rows to set the seam. Then we're going to open it out and press it open the length of the seam. But we have one more step before we're finished, because these seams are not ending up at a solid piece like the others were. So we're going to take it now and turn it over, and we're going to press these seams open. So now that we've set the seam, we're going to open it up. Just take our time and press these seams open. And I take the nose, the little point of the iron, and open it up and then set the iron down on it. And just let that steam do its work. Okay, we have our quilt top assembled as far as the center part of it, but now we're going to start putting our borders on all sides to frame it in. The first border we have is this green color, and we want a 1-inch finished border. So we need to cut strips that are 1.5 inches. We're going to measure the quilt in the middle from side to side, and we'll add that much to the top and bottom. Then we will measure the quilt from top to bottom in the center, and we will put those strips on each side. Now, because we do not have a pattern that we're going by, and we made our blocks the size that they turned out, we have a quilt top and we're not sure how big it is. So we're going to measure from side to side to find out how long to make our borders. And I have measured, it was 40 3/4 inches. Now when you're doing this part, you need to keep paper and pencil handy so you can write these amounts down, because you will not remember them. You're going to constantly be doing amounts from now on to get these borders on. So write it on a piece of paper. When you get your next amount, put it under. You know that you've always got to go by the number at the bottom. So we're going to keep our numbers there. I have cut my 2 strips. I've put one on the bottom here. I'm going to put this next one on the top. Then I will measure from the top of the green to the bottom of the green. And that is the length I need for the 2 side pieces. I've already cut strips. I will piece them as needed, and these are 1.5 inches wide. They will wind up a 1-inch border when it's finished. So I'll do that now, and then when we get back, we'll see how it looks. Now I told you at the beginning that I would tell you later what these clamps are for. That's what we're going to do now. When I put my border strips on, I get me a place that I can spread it out. It's a tabletop, or I use my long arm machine frame, whatever I need. You can do it on the floor. But you want to lay your strip here that you've already measured and cut, and we're going to pin it to one end. And I like to use 2 pins. Come in just far enough to get 2 pins. We do that second pin. Then we're going to hook this to the table with this clamp between those 2 pins, just enough to hold it taut. Now we come down here. We're going to do 2 pins. We use the other clamp, put just enough tension on it so that all of this evens out in here and you don't have any ripples anywhere, and you know you will hook them together evenly. Now this is the first part of this quilt we've used a pin on, and it's probably about the only part, the borders, because they're so long. Now I'm going to pin it often enough to know that I'm not going to wind up with a gather at the end. You don't have to use a tremendous amount of pins, maybe every 6 inches or so. And then we'll sew this together. Remove your pins before you go over them. When you get to the pin, stop just before. Take the pin out and then proceed. You do not want to hit one of these pins with your needle and break the needle or damage the machine. Now each time we get one of these borders on, we're going to set the seam, just iron it and set the seam, and then press it out so that the seam goes toward the border. We want all of our border seams to go outward. Now on this quilt, I've got some dark borders, and if you have dark borders and then light borders, if you will use a serger to attach these borders, it will keep all of those dark threads caught up in the serger threads, and you will not have dark threads getting over into the lighter areas and maybe show through when the quilt's done. Alright, we've gotten the first border on. We're ready for the light colored border. We're going to do the same thing. We're going to measure from this side to this side, and we're going to write that amount down. Then we're going to measure it again to make sure we did get it right. Measure it twice and cut it once. 42 5/8. And we'll get this border on. We finally gotten all the borders on our quilt. I did not show you every single border because all it is measuring, and you put the top and bottom, and then you measure this way and you do the 2 sides. You can put as many borders on your quilt as you want to. It's nice to vary the sizes of them. To me, a border can make the quilt. You can have a pretty inside, but the border can just set it off. There are no strict rules about it. There are no quilt police out there waiting to catch you doing something you shouldn't. Please take these patterns and go with ideas and make something unique of your own. If you have any questions, please contact me. My number will be at the end of the show, and I'll be glad to help you with anything I can. And until I see you again, happy quilting. I hope you get this finished and quilted, and on a future show I will show a binding episode where I can show you how to make pretty miter corners on your finished quilt. Good luck with your quilt, and happy quilting.